So thank you all for joining us at Indie AWS. We're so excited to have everyone here. A special thank you to Dave, our special guest who will be presenting. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. So big announcement this month. Our next meeting will actually be an in-person social hour at the District Tapped. So if you are registered on Meeting Place, you'll be able to get any updates that we have, but we'll be meeting at the regular time, the third Tuesday of the month, which will be May 17th at 7 p.m. So please make sure to RSVP. So we make sure to have a table big enough for everyone. I'll be sending email announcements through Meeting Place and Meetup. So yeah, please let us know if you'll be there. And we really look forward to getting together with everyone in person for this special event. And for those of you who aren't aware, we also have Indie Pie, and really excited. Indie Pie is actually celebrating 15 years in May. So it'll be our 15th anniversary of having meetups for Indie Pie. So we'll also be meeting again at the District Tap. We plan to have several speakers. This will actually be a hybrid event. So we'll have folks coming from the virtual communities, really just talking about the Python community and what it means and what the future of Python communities mean in this hybrid world. So we're really excited to be doing that as well. So make sure to mark your calendars, May 10th, if you're interested in joining us for our 15th anniversary of Indie Pie. As I mentioned a little bit ago, Cameron will be live tweeting for us tonight. So please follow Indie AWS on Twitter. Use hashtag Indie AWS to share any of your thoughts, comments. We'll be sharing parts of Dave's presentation throughout the event. So please be sure to follow along. And we just want to thank our organizing sponsor, which is 6 Feet Up. 6 Feet Up, if you don't know, it's a Python and cloud expert consulting company that helps innovative tech leaders build apps faster, innovate with AI and ML, simplify big data, and leverage cloud technology. Using modern technologies, we make anything possible for our clients. This is normally where Calvin will spotlight he is an Indie AWS hero. And Dave let me know that he actually helped Calvin get on that list. So we're so thankful to have our friends here tonight to help celebrate all the Indie relationships and 6 Feet Up's presence in the community. And if you're interested in sponsoring Indie AWS, please contact me, Laura at 6feetup.com, and I will be sure to put you in touch with the right people, and we'll figure out a sponsorship opportunity that works for everyone. If you have not already joined Indie Hackers on Slack, please do. We highly recommend posting. There's a jobs channel there that you can post your jobs. So we encourage everyone to be active. There's also an Indie AWS channel specifically within the Indie Hackers Slack. So that's where we share and talk, and we'll have all the updates from the in-person events. And also we have moved to meetingplace.io. So make sure that if you're still using Meetup to go to meetingplace.io, so Indie AWS, to claim your profile. And you'll be able to really easily transition your profile from Meetup to Meeting Place and get the most up-to-date announcements. And without further ado, no one really wants to hear from me. We're really here to hear from Dave about AWS Well-Architected and how we get architect for success. So without further ado.
Well, thank you for the time, and appreciate you, everyone joining and taking a little time out of your busy schedules to learn a little bit about Well-Architected. And this session is maybe not going to be the most technical compared to maybe some of the other sessions that you might have seen here on in the AWS meetup, but I hope you will find it useful, even as you think about how all the things you have to do technically, how important it is to make sure that you build systems that are architected according to best practices. And that's really what we're here for this evening. And I just want to take you through this process and see, hopefully you'll be able to take a few things with you as a result. So the things that I'm going to cover this evening is that I'll give you a quick introduction to the framework itself, and why it was created and how you can use it. And then the structure and design of the framework. So we'll dive deeper into all the different pieces of the framework itself, and also how you actually go about using it, how you would actually perform a review, a well-architected review. So I'll give you some tips there. And then I'll stop and do a quick demo of the tool. So there's a tool associated with the framework, and then some output that you get from that. And then I'll wrap up with some additional resources that are available to you. There's a lot of information available here for you. There's no shortage of that. And I'll cover a handful of those resources that you can take advantage of. So, how confident are you when you're building your systems that are really built following best practices in the cloud, right? This is really the ultimate question that we're trying to answer is, can you answer the question, are you well architected? Well, there's a lot behind that. We'll dive into this, but hopefully most of you would say, well, yes, of course, we've got great people on our team. We build great things, and there's always an opportunity to improve. So I think people come to this process from many different perspectives, different levels of maturity, and there's always something that you can learn. And that's the goal here, is to help you move along in that process. This is not a binary type of answer, whether you are or not. It's going to be a journey, and you will find that even if you think you've checked all the boxes, there's always something to do. There's always something to improve. And that's the goal here, is to help you along that path. So why do you really want to actually do this? You might be thinking, well, why would I want to even apply this? Well, we think there's a variety of reasons why this would be helpful. First, you want to be able to build and deploy your systems faster. You want to reduce firefighting. You want to manage your capacity and use automation, be able to experiment and release value to your customers more often, right? You want to lower your risks. While you're moving faster, you need to be aware of the risks along the way. And in your architecture, you want to be able to look into it to see where your risks are and address them early before you have an impact on your business. And you want to make informed decisions, clearly, and you want to have the ability to look at your systems architecturally and see how the decisions that you're making might impact your business outcomes. And then lastly, you want to learn AWS best practices. You want to make sure your teams are aware of best practices, things that we've learned actually by reviewing thousands and thousands of customer architectures through this process. We have this process, the framework itself was initially launched in 2012. So this has been around for a very long time and has matured significantly. And there's a lot of best practices that you can learn along the way. So whether you choose to make use of the tool itself or read all the white papers, you may not, but there are still some key nuggets that you can even take from this that can help you along the way. And we've seen customers be able to meet these kind of objectives when they've used the framework. So well-architected is really just a mechanism that just helps you to be successful in your cloud journey. You're going to learn about strategies and best practices that help you to architect, for success. You want to be able to, through this mechanism, you'll be able to measure your architecture based against those best practices, compared against them. And then as a result, you will have issues that you can then identify to say, this is areas for improvement. So that's really the key thing here. You learn what's the best way to do it. You measure your existing workload against those best practices, and then you figure out how to make improvements based upon those comparisons. So what is in the framework? Well, the framework is, it provides ultimately a set of questions. If we look from the right here, you will be answering some questions about your particular architecture, your application, or we call it a workload, and I'll define that a little bit later. But you're answering questions that are a part of a grouping of domains, which we call pillars, and I'll talk about those as well. And they're driven by design principles. So in those different pillars, and we'll talk about each one of those, there are particular design principles that then drive the questions to be asked. And based upon your answers to those questions, you will get some advice that comes back that says, here are some areas that you should really work on, areas for improvement. Or if you check all the boxes and you're doing all that, then you get the green check. And every workload that goes through this, I can guarantee you, has some area of improvement to be done. Now, another thing that's a part of this are what we call lenses. And lenses are a set of questions that are particular to a type of workload. We have a foundational lens that every workload, when you use the tool, it gets the foundational base well-architected lens. But then there are sort of domain workload specific lenses that we have built, and they start with actual documents that talk about best practices. So they start with white papers that describe the best practices. And you can see a handful of them here. Some of these have do appear in the tool itself. Not all of them have made it to the tool yet. We're working on those over time. And then you'll see in the bottom right, there's an option for a custom lens. And this is something that we launched at reInvent last year that allows customers to build your own lens. This came from a lot of customer feedback saying that these lenses are great, but there are things, best practices, standards that are unique to individual customers they would like to be able to put into the tool. Well, now you can do that as well. And I'll show you what that looks like later in the demo. So let's jump into what the structure and the design of the well-architected framework is. So let's start by looking at the pillars. So I had told you that the pillars are these areas of domain areas that have design principles behind them, and then the questions to be asked behind those. And you'll see these just really are foundational domains that you want to make sure that you are following best practices on. And if you look at these, there really isn't anything specific to the cloud about these. There certainly isn't anything specific to AWS. So this is really just best practices, generally, good architectural sense. And the first one is operational excellence. And what we mean by that is the ability to run and monitor your systems. We were just chatting there briefly. David was talking about monitoring observability, right? That's a key one. You got to be aware of what's happening in your environment, in your systems, and to be able to have processes and procedures that support it. So there's some technical related questions, but there are also some process related questions as well. Security, the ability to protect your information, the systems, your assets, and to be able to assess your risk and mitigate your risk associated with that. Reliability, the ability to recover from infrastructure or service failures. that's important no matter where you're running. Now, the cloud does give you the ability to be able to deal with those situations in a more efficient way, and maybe in ways that can't even be done on premises. But still, you need to be asking yourself those questions and answering how you're actually going to do that according to what your requirements are from your business. Performance efficiency, the ability to use computing resources efficiently to meet your requirements, especially as demand changes. Are you making use of the most appropriate resources to meet the demand in the most efficient way? There are, and it's related to cost optimization, but that's really to avoid or eliminate unnecessary costs. And as I'm sure many of you know, there's more than one way to architect a solution, not only in the cloud, but anywhere, right? That you can do it a lot of different ways, and they're not all treated equal when it comes to cost, right? And so there are more efficient ways to go about doing things. And so there's some particular questions around that. And then the last one is sustainability. This is a new pillar that was just recently introduced, and it's really to help you in your objectives to reduce your footprint. It's related to cost and perhaps performance efficiency. The idea here is to improve your efficiency of how you choose and where you deploy your resources that allow you to just make the most efficient use of them. And we do have some additional tools now, even in the AWS console, to help you evaluate that. And by the way, if any of you have questions along the way, feel free to come off mute and ask questions. I do have the chat window open here, but if I don't see it, feel free to come off mute and ask any questions, or if you have any comments. So I mentioned that there are design principles that are behind what we actually do with these pillars and the questions. There are design principles for each of the pillars, and then there's a set of general design principles, and that's what you're seeing here. And these really sort of drive the reason why we have the questions that we have, so that we're really getting at the heart of what really makes an application to be well architected. And you see these kind of principles. Again, they're not related to the cloud per se, although you might be able to answer them a little bit easier, or achieve them in the cloud a little bit easier. But you see the idea here of optimizing your approaches to your capacity, being able to automate and scale, and to really take a database-driven approach. And that last one, you may not be familiar with game days, but game days is a mechanism within AWS where the account teams can help work with customers to create simulated environments that are open-ended challenges where teams come together and compete against one another to try to get to the solution. The value of that and why it's there is that it allows you to learn about best practices, and then even potentially uncover some areas of where you could focus in on your own environments. So these are really high-level principles, but really helpful, that sort of drive where we go from here. Now, here's an example of one pillar's design principle, the security pillar. So you'll see these are just best practices. Again, nothing specific to the cloud per se, but these are things that would indicate a well-architected system. That if you're doing these things, you're probably on the right track. And the questions that follow in the tool really relate to these kind of design principles. So behind each design principle is one or more questions. Okay. All right. I want to jump into really what it is like to perform a well-architected review, what that process is like, and some best practices based upon how we have done these for quite a while. So first of all, the intent of a well-architected review is not an audit in its classic sense. The idea here is to help teams how to improve. This is not some sort of stamped audit response that you get from some sort of certification agency. No, this is a set of best practices and some recommendations from it. And it's not overly complicated. The idea here is to provide you advice that we have seen actually help people. It's pragmatic. This does not require some higher level calculus to figure out what's going on. These are just basic questions that have been proven to demonstrate or prove that an application is well architected. And once you've reviewed a workload, you should continually iterate on it with this process. And we have this concept of milestones in the tool that allow you to do that, where you take a snapshot of the responses that you have created for the questions at that point in time. And as part of a regular periodic review of your application, which is a best practice, perhaps maybe on a yearly basis or whenever there is a significant set of features that have changed, it's probably a good idea to go through this again so that you can see the process, how you have changed over time and how you're improving. So what have we learned from doing these reviews? Well, earlier is better. It's easier to fix things if you find areas for improvement rather than waiting later. You can influence design decisions much easier early in the process than later. So we recommend that a well-architected review is not done when you're in the brainstorming phase, because you just don't have enough set to really review it against the best practices. But before you actually are deploying it into production, it would be a good idea. So once you have your architecture at a fairly stable state, maybe you haven't got it all developed yet, but if you have the architecture in mind, this would be a good thing to do. Now, people don't intentionally make bad decisions about their architectures. For the most part, I don't think that's the case, but sometimes decisions are neglected or they're overlooked unintentionally. And this process can help you make sure that you cover the topics that you may have otherwise overlooked. For example, people typically they don't decide not to back up data. Maybe they just forget to talk about it, or some other best practice, it just doesn't get addressed. This will make sure that you are addressing some of those key things. And most workloads, when you go through this, will have some items that need to be addressed, some findings. And it's not a bad thing. And every workload that I've ever seen go through this, there's always something that needs to be addressed. And if you address them, that's one less thing that'll affect or slow down your business down the road. So that's the goal, is to do that. So there are some different use cases for how we've seen customers adopt this well-architected process. It's not just a single approach. What we typically see are these three kind of approaches. One of them is that they just really want to learn about best practices for the cloud, right? Like, how should we do such and such in the cloud? Or how are others doing this in the cloud? Or what does AWS recommend, right? This is a great place to go. So there's a great way to learn, and you're not alone, because these are best practices that are based upon many, many, many workloads that have gone through it. The other thing is for governance, and that we've seen where teams will choose to build in, as part of their governance process, to like measure their workloads against governance standards within the company. They might have those established, and this could be one of those, one of the processes that they follow, and actually record the results of, it could be a required step along the way before there's an approval for an application to go to production, for example. And then the last one is sort of related, but on the portfolio management side, it can help teams like get an aggregate view of how teams are maturing, where you can see, especially over time, in the milestones that are created, to see how teams are maturing in their adherence to best practices. So teams might use one or all of these as ways to leverage the framework and the tool. Now, I've used like the word application and workload interchangeably. In the tool, you'll see the term workload, and the workload is not just made up of technology components. That's what you would see in the center box there, your infrastructure, the services, the technical bits that make up your application. It's really also made up of people, and as well as the processes that are associated with that workload. I've got a quote here, and I'm not sure where this is. This is from the Well-Architected framework. Workload identifies a set of components that together deliver business value. Workload is usually the level of detail that business and technology leaders communicate about. Examples of workloads: marketing websites, e-commerce websites, backends for mobile app, analytics platforms, etc. Workloads vary in levels of architectural complexity, from static websites to architectures with multiple data stores and many components. So that gives you an idea of, when we say workload, what we're thinking about. And what we find is that if you start reviewing a workload and the conversation continually diverges, like on certain areas, it could be a sign that the workload needs to be divided more, that maybe your workload is too big. You might need, how you address security principles in one way is different than another. You might need to split that out if it makes sense, for example. So the steps you need to take are to really identify those workloads and get that particular scope down where it makes sense. And then it's really important that if you're like an application owner, you're not alone in this. There are likely sponsors that are involved, right? It's important that the person ultimately responsible for the success of this workload has, they've got funding and maybe headcount authority. They need to be behind this, as well as subject matter experts that you can identify for the particular pillars, right? It's very unlikely that there's one person that can dive deep across all those pillars. Now, there might be, if your team is small enough and you have all that detail in one person's head, maybe. The chances are there's multiple people, and that's partly what needs to happen here to make sure that you get the expertise from the proper subject matter experts to answer those questions. So the phases of the review, this is, again, you don't have to follow this process, but this is the way it's intended to be used, is that you define that workload and the sponsors and you scope it down. That's that preparation phase. Then you go through the review. And so you review the workload according to those questions, and I'll show you what the tool looks like here shortly. You record your answers, and then there's a report to publish. But then a very key step is in that respond phase, where you prioritize that HRI is a high risk item. So it will tell you items that it thinks are high risk based upon the way you answered the question. Prioritize them. You might rationalize them. You might say, no, that doesn't apply. And I can show you how that works in the tool as well, where you can override a question to say there's a good reason why we answered this way and it's not really a problem. But again, at least you're not overlooking that. You're going through it and addressing it. And then come up with a review of how you're actually going to respond to it in this treatment plan of how you actually go about setting actions to fix address the items that you've identified. The tool and the framework can be used in a variety of ways. And you can use it as an individual and just go through it. If, let's say, you're in charge of the architectural review for an application, you can do that. It's certainly you have everything you need to be able to do that, but we typically see its most value is when a team is doing this, right? Especially when you have a cross-functional team involved in your workload to be able to go through it. You typically need that. And then there are other ways if you need help. You can, if you are working with an AWS account team where you have a solutions architect that's working with you, we can actually lead such a review. Before the tool was available online, that was the only way to do it. But now it's a tool, a self-serve tool. So those options up above there are new, but we're still available if you're working with an AWS account team to go through that, or if you prefer, there are partners, AWS partners that have been certified on the well-architected framework and process. You can work with a partner as well. So you have multiple options. Typically, people get started just in the self-service side and learn there. Okay. I'm going to jump into a quick demo of the tool. This will take me just a moment. While I'm doing that, let me know if there are any questions. Or hopefully I've made sense so far in what I've talked about.
I'm intrigued. Anyone else have questions?
I do, but I want to see the tool first because it might answer or it might
sure.
complicate my question. We'll see.
Not a problem. Okay, I'm going to try to drag this over onto the screen that I'm sharing. I don't know if I'm sharing the whole screen. Do you see something changing over here?
Yes, I
okay,
see. We
good.
see a new
All
screen
right.
coming.
Okay, good. I'm gonna look this way because what I'm sharing is over here. So what you're looking at here is the AWS console. So if you've used AWS, this should look familiar. The AWS Well-Architected tool is it's a service. It's an option in the AWS console. So just like you can bring up EC2 or S3 or Lambda, you have the Well-Architected tool. So if you just start typing for Well-Architected, you will see it as an option. Now, this tool I just want to make sure it's clear that everyone knows, this tool does not scan your workloads. This is a tool that allows you to record answers to questions according to the framework. It doesn't do anything it doesn't automate a scanning of your workloads, but it's a place for you to retain your responses to your particular questions to on your workload. So you can go back and you can see your answers. So you'll see here that there's a concept of a workload, and based upon what we had said before, you create a workload by first defining it. And again, you just put fairly simple information here. Let's say I have my workload here, and I think I need to put a description. I'm not going to be a lot of detail here, but you can have, who the owner is, and a lot of these other options here are optional as to whether you want to provide information. I believe the regions are required, if I recall correctly. But again, this is just good metadata to have about your workload anyway, right? You can even include account numbers, the AWS account numbers that are associated with the workload. And then you can provide a link to an architectural design. That this is just a link, right? But if you do have a repository of architectural designs, you can add that, and some other information here as well. even tagging. So once you do that, you have the choice of lenses. If you recall, I told you that some of the lenses are available in the tool. By default, you get the base framework, which has all the questions across those pillars that I mentioned before. And there's a few other ones as well. And then there is also a custom lens. And I have created a custom lens here that I can add to my workload. And I'll show you what that looks like. But I can add any of these lenses and click define workload, and I will have a workload that's ready to go. So I'm going to show you one that I have completed, and you can see how this works. So this is my sample app, and it has just the well-architected framework base lens. And there are 58 questions associated with it. And I have answered all 58 of those. If I haven't answered all of them, it would give me a different number. The reality is you'll probably come back multiple times when you're going through this process. This isn't something that you just spend 10 minutes on and you're done. This could take quite some time to get through. And then it's also identified high and medium risk items based upon the answers to my questions. But I can go back in here and say I'm going to continue reviewing, and you'll see this is the meat of the framework and the tool itself. So over on the left, you will see all of the pillars. Here they are. And each pillar has a set of questions. And I can look at an individual question, and then I can see the possible answers. And based upon how I have checked whether I am doing these things that it's asking about, it will give me a result of whether there's no issue or it's a medium risk or high risk. And there's rules around that as to how it figures out what is medium and high risk. Now you can even choose to say, well, this question doesn't apply to this particular workload. And then you can say the reason why. And there's also a notes option. Highly recommend putting notes in here. When we had gone through this with customers, we usually take copious notes about the conversations that are going on here. And there might even be links that you put to other resources as you go through talking about it. There's even, if you don't want to completely disregard the question, you can even have the option to choose particular best practices that don't apply to this workload, right? So this has a series of best practices that it's recommending. But if for some reason one of these just like it really doesn't apply for whatever reason, you can go in here and say why. Like, I'm going to take that one off and I'm going to tell you it's out of scope, and maybe I can provide some more notes. And now it will no longer evaluate the lack of my answer to that particular option. So you can see it takes it out of scope. So historically, when this was originally built, you didn't have those options. Customers gave us feedback to say, listen, there's very unique needs from workload to workload. So you'll go through each of these pillars and all the questions, and you can see it could take a little time to go through. Now, along with the question and the best practice answers here that you would check, either you are doing it or not, you will see a whole set of resources over on the right that can help. So this one doesn't have as many links. Some of these have more options as far as links to videos and other help that can really be very helpful. Here's an example, a number of videos and other documentation on best practices for you in helping you understand the particular best practices. Okay, so as you go through this, you're just answering each of these questions. And if I go back here to my sample app, I have, based upon the answers to these questions, I have some of these it considers high risk, some it considers medium risk. But if I click on this, it will take me to an improvement plan where it will highlight the particular questions that it determined as high risk. And the recommended improvement items are really the ones that I did not actually select. And I can chase these, and it's going to give me more information about what are the best, details on the best practice for how to go about addressing that. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you was the custom lens. So sorry, if I go back to my workload and I want to add a custom lens. And I've seen this before where customers have a need to have something associated with internal governance that requires every application to do something. For example, have you gone through a privacy review? So I've added a custom lens that I'm going to show you where you can add to your existing workload that you're reviewing. So you go in and edit, and you can select this my company custom lens. I have one question in here, but now you'll see that I think I had already answered in here, so it says it's already answered. But if I go in here and look at, if I go back here to review, this is the one question that I asked. How are you ensuring data in this workload meets company privacy policy? Well, I came up with two answers. You could say that it has been met and you've actually had privacy board meeting review with it. And I can choose how the answers, how to interpret the answers as to whether it's a medium risk or a high risk. And I'll show you what that looks like here shortly. But that's how this works. And then you have control over all of the information that sits here in the helpful resources as well. So all of this information around your custom lens is currently defined by a JSON document. So if I go in here and look at my custom lens, I have this JSON file, and I've got it in a editor here. I'll drag over here so you can see. So there's a format you can download and then create your own lens by just following a very simple process of what the question is, or the pillar, and then what the question is, and then a description, and then what the different choices are, right? I had two choices for this answer, as well as none of the above, which will uniquely just tell it that no answer has been given. And then I have the rules. So if I have both answers to both of those are check marked, there's no risk. But if there's one and not the other, there's a medium risk. And then by default, where you've selected none, that's a high risk. So that's how you select that. And once you create that document, you can, I can edit it here and choose the file and upload it if I have, and I can create multiple versions of it as well. The other thing you can do with custom lenses is that you can share them, and you can, they start in a draft state, and then you can publish them. And I can also share them with other accounts, other IAM identities, identity and access management, so other AWS principals. So that's a helpful thing, because you probably only want to do this once and then just make it available to others who are doing it. Then one last thing I want to show you is how you look at reports. So once I've gone through my app and my workload, I've answered all the questions, I want to be able to take a look at a document that I could share, because this is in the AWS console. Not everyone's going to be in the console. So this concept of milestones. So the milestone is really just a snapshot of the particular point in time of the answers to all the questions. And I've already created a couple of them. So if I look at this particular milestone, I can, let's see, I got to figure out where it is. I can generate report right here, sorry. So I generate a report, and what it does is it just creates a PDF of that particular milestone. And then, I've got, I already did it once before. And there is the generated PDF. And you will see that it highlights the improvement plan based upon what I have answered, and shows all the details here. It's everything from the website itself, but it's now in a PDF document, and it shows me, the high risk items, and I can click on that and it can tell me, here are the ones you selected, here are the ones you didn't select. And I didn't put any notes in here, but it would obviously include all those notes that you take in the tool itself, as well as links to the improvement plans. So this is a great way to generate for a workload. How are we going to improve this particular architecture according to best practices? And you have some control over what you identify as a high risk item or not. So Toby, did you have any questions based upon what you saw?
Well, I think there was something in there about pillar priority, I think.
Oh,
is that
yes.
configurable also?
It is. So if we go into a workload, pillar priority just shows the order in which it will, I believe, it will show the items in the tool and in the report. So if you want security to show up first,
I gotcha. So it's not putting priority on one over the other. It's just how
it's just the way it appears. Right.
Gotcha. And then those little info tags on all the questions, are those just linking to that documentation over on the right? Are those little links? Is that what that is? Or
let's take a look. What was it in here?
Yeah. So like if you go down to the choices, there's a little info link. Is that just linking to the
it's just an anchor to this whole pane. This is for each of those questions. So you'll see as I click down.
Gotcha.
It's all there. It's just it's just an anchor to that particular part. That's all that is.
And okay. And then the last thing just about your demo was, is there any cost associated with this service as far as saving these out there?
Nope, there is no cost to using this tool. It is a regional tool. So you'll see here, just like many services in AWS, you pick your region that you're going to operate in. So it's a regional tool. We recommend that you have a couple options for your strategy for where you would use this tool. You could say that there's a central architecture function that needs to be in control of managing all of these well-architected reviews. You probably want to do that in a single account and probably in a single region, and you've got all your workloads there, right? The other way is if it's more distributed and you want teams to be in charge of that, then they might want to do them in their own accounts. But if you're doing multiple ones, you may not want to have them scattered across multiple regions. You might want to just stick in a single region in order to do it. So it is available in a number of regions, not all of them, but many of them. So I would typically stick with a region and keep a single place for this to the point where it makes sense organizationally.
And then my last one, it's not really related to the demo, but just the framework in general. Is there anything in the framework and or their tool that kind of looks at things from a account structure level, like those decisions on, based on these things, how many, AWS accounts should I have this like carved out into, or, you know what I mean? Like a decision to have one AWS account or 4 AWS accounts, is there any kind of best practice in kind of making that level of a decision?
I am not aware of account organizational specific questions. There is a foundational lens that has been developed that is not in the tool, but is, I believe, is a white paper that might address some of that. I don't know exactly whether that's in there or not, so I'd have to follow up to know for sure, but I'm happy to do that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just kind of curious. I know I've been part of those conversations before, and
yeah, sure. Yeah, I get it. All right. I'll reach out to you on LinkedIn if I have an answer for you. How's that?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Looks like Tony. I think Tony had his hand raised first, and then David too. So
go ahead, guys.
Yeah, is there a way to view the risk evaluation rules, the logic for a non-custom lens?
I am not aware of whether there. I see what you're saying. Like, which ones do you select to get the green or yellow or red check marks?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. You can find out by process of elimination, but that's not very effective. I'm not sure. It's not a secret thing by any means, but I'm not aware of there being anything published that says which ones need to be checked to get, the green. That's a good question. I'm not aware of that.
Okay. All right. Just asking. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. So everything is questions, right? It's not like it connects to the account and gets the data.
That's
In
right.
your experience, how sincere is people while doing this? Because to tell you the truth, I have done one, and I'm not sure we were completely candid when we answered it.
Yeah, it's only as good as the veracity of the information that is provided, right? Clearly. And this tool, I will not give any sort of claim that it will somehow pull that kind of information out of someone who's not willing to provide it. So it's just a tool. And what it might do is if you come back with that kind of response, might be an opportunity for a conversation, for a follow-up. But yeah, it's not a magic tool by any means for doing that. And it does require not only people to be forthright and accurate in answering the questions, but you also need to have the right people in the room, because sometimes you don't have the right people in the room, because you might get different answers from people who might know something else that's more detailed. So you're right. It does require, honesty, but also getting the right people in the room.
Yes, I could say it's like playing solitaire, right? If you cheat, you're only
that's right
yourself.
You're exactly right. For sure. That's 100%.
I do see one other question, Dave, in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
From David. Is there a way to migrate the reviews to another account if you want to change later?
Well, you can share reviews with other accounts. I don't know if you can migrate them. I know you can share them. So just like you can share a lens with others, you can share the reviews themselves with other accounts, but they stay in that account. The source stays in that account. The other thing you can do is generate a report like that PDF, and you have that. So I don't know if there's a way to migrate the actual source of the data to like another account. I'd have to search that. But if that's not possible, at a minimum, you could share it with another account. You could also export to a PDF, and you have the the actual report that you could regenerate it if you need to, because you have in that report everything that you have entered into the questions in the tool.
I love that Zoom has emojis now. This is so fun. David Soul, did we answer all of your questions, or do you have any others?
No, all good. Sorry, I didn't lower my hand.
So I do have just a few additional slides. I know we're at the top of the hour. I will not be offended if you drop off, but I just have a few additional things I wanted to share. This is, I'm mostly done here, is some additional resources. And by the way, I'll make these slides available. Laura, if you want to share them, I'll give you a PDF that you can share with others, because there's a lot of links in here and you may not want to do a bunch of screenshotting, but you're welcome to. I even put some QR codes in here too if you want. But so the first thing is the main website that talks about the framework is here. This is the landing page, launching page for all of the different resources available. So this is a great place to go just to learn more about it. There's links to the white papers on each pillar and the framework itself. If you're having trouble getting asleep at night, there's a lot of reading here. It's really good information. There's been a ton of thought put into this, and you can learn a ton. And so there's links to different things, as well as obviously a link to the tool there as well. Now the tool has the questions, and you can use the tool to see all the questions, but you don't have to use the tool to just read about all the different questions. There is actually the content. There's a content website itself. That's this link. And you can actually get a nice map view that shows you, this is the main core lens, not the other miscellaneous domain specific lenses, but the main lens. You can see all the various pillars and the design principles and the various questions associated with it, and the links to all of that you remember off to the side in the tool, all the different links and the info pane, all of that's here. You don't have to go through the tool in order to see all the questions and all the best practices. So this is a great way to see all of it without actually using the tool if you just want to look at the content. And then if you're a hands-on kind of person, you're going to say, hey, what kind of workloads would actually be a good example that demonstrate the best practices? Well, Well-Architected Labs does that. So this site is a guide that takes you through each of the pillars and sample code, which is also available on GitHub, where you can deploy sample applications that demonstrate these different best practices. So if you're wondering, well, how would you go about doing something like that? This is it. So this is a great way if you want to get a hands-on lab type of experience, learning about how you actually implement and put into practice these best practices. This is a great site for that. And on the other end, if you're looking for like complete solutions, sort of end to end that are use case specific, there is this library called the AWS Solutions Library. And we've had teams at AWS that build solutions to solve particular problems that are built on top of AWS. And these are ones that they've been vetted by AWS. They've been built according to those best practices. And there's a ton of them out there. And it's a great way if you want to see how you would actually implement something for a particular use case, go check out the solutions library. These are typically CloudFormation templates that you just deploy. So it comes with a deployment guide, architecture diagrams, and all that. So this is a great thing if you're wondering, like, well, here's like, how do you do a particular thing according to best practices for a use case? These are great ones to look at. And then lastly, training. There is a free online digital training on the Well-Architected framework. It goes into a little bit more detail than I covered here, about an hour and a half long. If you want to learn more about it, or like send your team Teams to learn about it. This here will cover all of the pieces of the framework and the tool so that you can learn more about it that way as well. And that is all I have to offer. Hopefully that made some sense to you, that you learned a little bit about Well-Architected, and hopefully you get a chance to get out there and actually try it out. Any other questions?
Yeah. Where'd you say you were sending the slides to? I'm sorry.
I make them available to you, Laura. I don't know, will you put them out like on the meeting place site?
Exactly. I'll share them both in the Indie Hackers Slack, as well as when I send the recap email that you all get when you're registered through Meeting Place and Meetup. You'll get an email, and I'll make sure they're linked there as well. So, and we'll also have this video recording available on YouTube by probably the end of this week. So when that goes up on YouTube, then I'll send out the email that has the link as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. This was awesome, Dave. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I learned a lot.
Happy to do it. Well, feel free, if anyone has questions, you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn here, and happy to help where I can.